Good morning, guys. I hope everyone is having a wonderful week so far. Happy Wednesday, halfway there. Anyways, just a couple things. Bear with me a bit this week if I seem a little off. My grandmother passed away on the weekend, and I've just been a little kind of off, to say the least. But I wanted to get on here and talk a little bit about birth control. And for those that don't know, as far as like my experience with birth control, so I went on birth control when I was probably about 17, was dating someone, and just was like, no, I'm not having babies. So anyways, had a variety of birth controls, from the Depo-Provera shot, like the every 3-month shot, to being on the pill and then getting an IUD, and then going, I think the IUD was probably like 7-10 years, whatever that is. During this time, I stopped having a period. So long story short, probably for about 15 years, I didn't have a period. Every time I went to my doctor, she was just like, oh, well, are you okay with not having a period? Like, if you're okay, I'm okay. So not really explaining to me what all was going on by not having a period, by being on birth control pills. So one of the things within my program is, I do kind of focus on what natural hormone fluctuations should look like. So, and based off of that, what we predict that to be, a lot of training and nutrition and everything is kind of cycled around that. So being on birth control can interfere with that a little bit. But also, if you are transitioning off birth control, it might be a good way to start to sync your body with what your natural hormone function should look like. So just a couple things about birth control. I'm going to use mainly the pill as far as like references are concerned, depending on the IUD. Like when I talk about kind of getting off of hormonal birth controls, as far as like liver function and the importance of that, I'll be making reference to basically any birth control that does use hormones. But just as far as the pill is concerned, just so you know, when you are on the pill, your body doesn't ovulate. So natural hormone fluctuations would imply that you have estrogen present during the first half, progesterone present during the second half. Progesterone is produced when ovulation occurs. So the corpus luteum is where progesterone comes from. So in our bodies, progesterone is produced either by the ovaries or the adrenals, but majority of that is produced from the ovaries. So when you don't ovulate, your body is not producing progesterone. So progesterone basically puts estrogen in check. So if you're not getting that ovulation to occur, if your body's not ovulating, whether, there's different ones, but reasons why, whether it be like low body fat or, under eating, like reasons that your body views that you shouldn't be reproductively active at this point in time. But from the birth control standpoint, basically what birth control is doing is it's shutting down ovulation for you. So therefore you are not producing progesterone in your cycle. So when people generally, and as far as like the bleed that you're experiencing, that's a withdrawal bleed. So that last row of pills, that last week of pills, is basically a placebo associated with your cycle to make you bleed. Because from what I've read, at some point, when the male doctors created birth control, they thought women would feel like it was weird to not bleed, so they put this bleed week in there. But just so you know, that bleed associated with birth control is not a natural bleed. It is a drug-induced one. So as far as like when you do cycle, like it's not because your body is naturally bleeding. So things you want progesterone for. So I know I've talked about like estrogen is great, like it makes increases serotonin and dopamine and decreases inflammation. And like estrogen is great, but as with anything, it needs to have its checks and balances. So estrogen is great when it occurs in the right amount, but when it doesn't have the balance or that like progesterone putting it in its place, then things can be a little off. When you do take birth control, you're subjecting your body to a synthetic form of estrogen. So that means the longer you're on it, the less your body remembers how to make it. So anyways, we'll leave that there. So progesterone, because I've talked about, during the second half of your cycle, like that's where inflammation occurs. So you're like, hey, why would I want to have progesterone if, it causes these, drop in serotonin, dopamine, higher levels of inflammation. Like, why would I want that? You want it, okay? Understand, progesterone helps with GABA production in your brain, which helps reduce anxiety. It helps giving you that kind of calm, like empathetic feeling during that third, fourth week, going into that mainly the third week, going into the fourth week of your cycle. So progesterone is important, so I don't want you to think that it's not important. Plus, it also puts estrogen in check. Like when you have higher levels of estrogen, that's where you can see those heavy periods start to occur. So it is important to have both estrogen and progesterone in your cycle. So things that, progesterone is important for. It's important to reduce anxiety. It's important to increase sleepiness, and has a calming effect on the brain and the body. So another thing they don't tell you about birth control, it has been tied to things like depression and even suicide. So it really does disrupt that overall chemical balance within your body. So, if you, like I've talked to some people and they're like, yeah, I had to go off birth control. Like I started it and I just went into this major depression, and there are a lot of side effects to birth control that they don't tell you about. And the more I've looked into it, and coming from a place where I didn't have a period for 15 years and then working on getting my period back, which I'll talk a little bit about kind of what that process looks like, as far as birth control does deplete nutrients that are essential for your hormone production. So with the birth control pill, those nutrients are depleted. It is important to reestablish those nutrients, whether it be through food, whether it be through some supplementation at the beginning, because ideally we want to get as much through food as possible. But it also does burden your liver. So I'll talk a little bit about my process of getting my period back after coming off birth control pills, because I stopped having a period even when, I was supposed to have that pill bleed at the end of my pill cycle. Anyways, so progesterone helps us use fat as fuel, so it is important. It helps to build and maintain bones, protects our breasts and our uterus against cancer, and it helps our cells use our thyroid hormone. So it is very important to have that progesterone. So I don't want you to think that, having the pill is great. When you do have that pill, your body is subjected to a synthetic hormone. So it will start to downregulate its natural ability to produce those hormones. So that's kind of one of the things that I focused on within my program, is through nutrition and seed cycling, working to create that supportive environment to support estrogen and progesterone. So whether you're cycling regularly or whether you are working to come off the pill and establish a normal cycle, it is important. And there are aspects of my program that do kind of target that. When you do come off the pill, so things to be aware of: the pill does deplete nutrients. It raises inflammation in your body, which causes, additional stress. It stresses the adrenals, it stresses the thyroid, it can cause insulin dysregulation. So one thing that I noticed when I transitioned from, I don't remember if it was the IUD to birth control pills, but whatever, I have had acne issues. And higher levels of androgens can be associated with insulin resistance, or basically like dysregulation of your insulin. So one of the things that I do focus on within my program is helping to manage blood sugar regulation, so create better stability within your insulin levels. It also does disrupt, or the pill does disrupt your gut microbiome. So in the process of removing synthetic products, estrogen, your liver is the primary thing. So if you bog down your liver with synthetic hormones, and then if we think about other things in our environment, whether it be alcohol consumption, like prescription medications, like, synthetic hormones associated with birth control are just one of the things that our liver has to deal with. So if your liver has to work overtime, then, or if there's things that are kind of bogging it down where it's prioritizing the removal of, like, for example, alcohol. When we consume alcohol, alcohol is viewed as a toxin. So the body will prioritize the removal of alcohol above removing metabolites such as estrogen metabolite, which higher levels of estrogen metabolites will then get recirculated into the body because the body is prioritizing removing the alcohol versus removing the estrogen at that point in time. So as far as when we consume things, whether it be synthetic hormones, whether it be prescription medications that maybe we don't know that much about as far as what nutrients it might deplete, like kind of the burden that it puts on the liver, it is important to support the liver through nutrition or even an occasional supplementation here and there to make sure that your liver is working at optimum potential. So the process of removing hormones, basically, it goes through your liver. Your liver has phase 1, phase 2 detox systems, or pathways. So basically, your liver's ability to turn the hormone into a metabolite for removal through the kidneys and the gut. So, if we think back on where the gut, or where the pill depletes or affects things within our body, the pill will affect our gut microbiome. So if our liver is being burdened and maybe moving a little bit slower, like it's always working, but it could be working better potentially. Basically, the liver could be recirculating extra estrogen metabolites, which could be causing a relative estrogen dominance. Actually, I'm not going to talk about that right now. So if the liver is bogged down and your gut microbiome is affected, then your body's ability to remove those things is affected. So back to kind of how I got my period back. So I've worked with a variety of great mentors from the science hormone kind of standpoint. And one of the ones that I was working with, she was like, hey, like if you've done birth control, you would benefit from, supporting it with, it was a liver support supplement. So, and if anyone wants that, let me know. So basically giving myself a little extra support from supplementation, increasing water, like double time on the water, and increasing fiber. So things that fiber helps. So basically fiber will help bind on to things like estrogen metabolites to help remove them from your body. So making sure that you're getting enough cruciferous vegetables in is very important. So if you are recovering from things like hormonal birth control, support your liver, support your gut, lots of water, cruciferous vegetables, and, give yourself a little extra, like, support, supplementation if you need it. Let's see. I wrote down some things that I wanted to make sure that I mentioned. So as far as nutrients that the pill does deplete, B6, magnesium, and zinc are some key nutrients needed for your hormone health that the pill does deplete if your progesterone does dip. So I'll probably save this for another time because I think it's really important. But there's a couple different kind of estrogen dominances. So there's a frank estrogen dominance versus a relative estrogen dominance. So relative has to do with estrogen being higher relative to progesterone. Frank has to do with estrogen just being high relative to lifestyle. So progesterone could be where it needs to be, but because of various lifestyle things, it might create a dominance with estrogen. So there's frank versus relative estrogen dominance. And I'll talk again about those. Don't really want to touch on them too much today just because I feel like I've already talked a lot. But if your progesterone is to dip, generally we feel irritable. We have a lack of control of our mood. We start to feel a little bit cranky. So those kind of things could be associated with progesterone being not where they should be. So anyways, I feel like that was a lot for this morning. Happy Wednesday. Ways to increase progesterone naturally are going to be things like incorporating B6 rich foods, wild-caught fish, grass-fed beef and chicken, like spinach, sweet potatoes, bananas. Let's see, I think those are all the things I wanted to make sure that I covered on this. Please let me know if you have any questions. I feel like I kind of went pretty big on that. So anyways, I hope everyone is having a wonderful week. And if you have any questions about any of the stuff that I talked about today, please let me know. Yeah, have a wonderful week. Happy Wednesday.